is up, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Big Apple Banter. I'm your host, Crystal, joined along my long-term childhood friends in Matt Lasita and Jesse Bihar, three kids from Long Island who have a burning passion for New York sports. And throughout the years, we've had our sports arguments, but we figured, why not bring the arguments to the microphone? So we decided to film a podcast. Now, before we get into today's topic, which is the New York Giants, Jesse and Matt, let's introduce ourselves.
So my name's Jesse Bihar. I've played sports my entire life, whether it was baseball growing up, lacrosse. I played football in high school. Playing sports has been a huge part of my life, not only playing, but watching. I remember with Matt, even in our second grade class, like me and Matt used to give presentations in front of the class about sports news.
Shout out
So
Mr.
even from
Lacazzi.
Yeah, shout out Mr. Lacazzi. So even from a very young age, I've been watching sports. I've probably never missed a Giant game since like third grade. I catch almost every Ranger, Yankee, and Knick game. I talk about sports all the time with my friends, so I thought, why not, record it?
Yeah, man. Similar to Jesse, I grew up playing sports. It's like my entire life. I want to make a career out of it one day. There's just something about sports, that it's just like in the moment feeling that you get. It's really unmatched, and I just find it so fascinating. So I think it'd also be fun to just hash out our arguments live on air because
There'll be a few. There'll be a few.
Lord knows me and J-Man have had our fair share. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, super pumped to have you guys on. And, hopefully throughout the recording of these episodes, we get to touch on different points, whether it's the Giants, whether it's the Yankees, the Rangers, the Knicks, whatever it may be. I think we've all had our fair share of sports moments. And unfortunately, as New York fans, we haven't seen a whole lot of winning. And that trend with the New York Giants has kind of continued, especially this past season. They go 3-14 on the year. So the point of this episode is kind of going to be going through some of the positives and the negatives with the Giants. So obviously with a 3-14 record, not a whole lot of great to talk about, but they do have the third overall pick coming into the draft this year. Specifically talking about last year's draft, that's where most of the positives come. So Matty L, we're going to start with you and talk about just this incoming draft class, the rookie year they had, and starting with the headline guy, Malik Neighbors. What a season he had.
Yeah, man, it was historically great season. I mean, 109 catches, 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. He could have beaten Odell's rookie season record. I mean, Odell only did play in 12 games, but this guy's special. I mean, you could just tell the way that he just separates on his routes, creates separation. He's really explosive. Like, it's something to be excited about, that's for sure. He finished as the ninth best receiver, according to PFF on their ranking. And he was seventh in receiving yards and top three in receptions. So he heated up towards the end of the season. So it's exciting stuff. I think we can all agree that if we had a quarterback this year, he could have put up even more monster numbers. But that's another problem that we'll have to address in the future. But I'm excited about the guy.
And Jesse, you're the football player. You were the high school quarterback, and I know you're a little more critical of football players sometimes than maybe me and Matty L are. So what a season he had. But what are your thoughts here, J-Man?
Yeah, I think Neighbors had a great season, kind of like what Matt said. Reminded me actually a lot of Odell. I think his first step is really good. He creates a lot of separation. I guess I'll start with some negatives and I'll go into my positives. He had 8 drops.
Yeah,
a classic.
There it is.
Classic.
He had eight drops in the season. So I'm assuming that's going to be his number one biggest issue in the offseason, just standing by the jugs machine, rep after rep. He had some injuries. While like injuries could be viewed as a bad thing, he still put up 1,200 yards with a groin injury, with a concussion and all that. So I think him getting hurt is an issue, and hopefully, that's not a thing moving forward. But I think it's kind of a testament to his toughness and his just playmaking ability to, even while he is hurt and questionable and missed half the practices during the whole season, still being able to put up this spectacular and even historical season.
Yeah. Incredible player. I want to bring something up to you guys. Obviously, this past draft class, so many talented quarterbacks come out of there. Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, who personally, I love the Malik Neighbors pick, but think about if you had Bo Nix sitting there playing quarterback for the Giants, they could have had an entirely different year, an entirely different future building, but obviously it's tough to argue that Neighbors was a bust. I mean, what an incredible season. But what do you guys think? Like, should they have taken Bo Nix there? How do you think that could have been different? J-Man, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think ironically, like I think me and Matt have like differed on every single draft or who we think the Giants select. Besides this last year, I didn't think
Yeah.
Neighbors was the right pick. I think when I mean they had Daniel Jones at the time. When you have him down for $40 million a year, it's hard to draft a quarterback behind him. Even if you know like it might be the last season, you still have to give your guy a chance to be paid him that kind of money. So I do think it was the right pick. I think looking at it in hindsight, yeah, I would have rather have Bo Nix. Maybe McCarthy. Like maybe McCarthy wouldn't have gotten hurt, and he would have been a good quarterback. I do think Neighbors was the right pick, but I think we desperately need a quarterback, and the pick has to be a quarterback this year.
Yeah. Martin?
Yeah, I mean, I would say going into the draft, we knew they wanted to trade up, which like I was all over Drake May. I want him. I mean, Jaden Daniels obviously
Yeah,
historic
Yeah.
season would have been amazing. And classic like this year where we blew the first pick. We won a game late last year that cost us some pick or some spots
Yeah.
on the draft board. But I mean, I'm fine with the Malik Nayers take. I mean, it's just because like we would have thrown Bo Nix into like we were already this bad on offense, right?
Yeah, he
And
would have no
like we had
receivers.
no
Yeah.
we had no receivers. Like
Yeah, it's true.
it would have been a really hard situation to put a rookie quarterback into. Plus, he would have been behind Daniel Jones for the first half of the year. Like who knows what could happen.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think you learn and you move on. And this year, I mean, we have to take a quarterback, whether that's free agency or through the draft. But I mean, we'll save that for another time. But I mean, Bo Nix was pretty good this year, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. Obviously, the Giants really haven't had a true alpha number one since Odell. So
Mhm.
getting a cornerstone weapon is critical to the future of your team. So definitely a great player who I'm excited to watch in the future. Now, continuing with this draft class, probably the best from Joe Shane so far. Let's talk about Newman and Phillips so far on the back end. The Giants defense, a little streaky during the year. I think we can all agree. Defensive line was pretty solid throughout, but some coverage issues. So, Jesse, let's start with you here. Tyler Newman. PFF seemed to really like him in comparison to a lot of the other corners and safeties in the NFL. So, let's just talk about him for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Newman had a pretty good season. Definitely progressed like as it went on. I think PFF has him. Yeah, they've them 48th out of 170 in the pass rush defense. They have him 30th. Coverage grade, they have him 102. I feel like I did see him get burned a few times, but that kind of happens as a rookie. What I'd like to see more out of Newman is takeaways. He had no picks as a safety. And I think that's what the Giants defense was really missing this year. I think we had the longest streak in franchise history without a
Yeah,
pick.
with
We
no
had like a
one
pick week.
crazy.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
is it? Yeah, absolutely insane. And it's hard to win football games, losing the turnover margin pretty much every game, especially having Daniel Jones throwing picks on the other side. I think Newman was a good pick. I think he's progressed as a player, and I'm excited to see him in year two.
Yeah, and Matt, I'll go to you with this one. We're talking about Drew Phillips now, and Deontay Banks had a phenomenal rookie season, kind of was a little streaky, but then really solidified himself as having that ability to kind of shut down opponents' wide receiver ones. He really struggled this year, but that kind of opened the door for a guy like Drew Phillips in that coverage game, and also PFF seemed to like him too. So, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, man, you could just tell when you turn on the game. Like you saw that guy just like there's always one guy sprinting to the ball, and that was always Drew Phillips. And I
Yeah.
mean, PFF saw what we saw too. I mean, ranked him as the 15th best cornerback in the entire league, which says something. I think he was one of our two steals of this draft. I mean, we'll talk about the next guy next. It's obvious, but yeah, it's encouraging. I think it's a great sign for like that we can find talent. The front office is doing a good job finding talent on this team, but we just got to put like the right elements together. But yeah, it was a really exciting year for Drew Phillips.
Just to add on to that point, like I feel like Drew Phillips was, like Matt said, like everywhere on the field. Something I think that Deontay Banks like lacks, and I think you saw it earlier on the season, is effort. It seemed like Drew Phillips was
Mhm.
playing every play at 110%. I think especially on the defensive side of the ball, like you need that like every single play, and he brings that intensity. So I think he's going to be a very good corner moving into the future.
Kind of transitioning now, we all saw yesterday how important the running game is. Our guy Saquon Barkley kind of dominating the NFC Championship game, but it appears the Giants kind of replaced him through the draft. A stud in Tyrone Tracy. They signed Devin Singletary in the offseason, but really the running back job became available to Tyrone Tracy, who kind of just ran away with it. I especially remember that Panthers game in Germany where he kind of went crazy, owned that game. He had an incredible touchdown run. He was a late round pick, I believe a fifth round guy. And when you lose a guy the caliber of Saquon Barkley, obviously not easy to replace him, but Tyrone Tracy did a great job. So what are your guys' thoughts here?
Tracy definitely stepped up in a big way this year. I mean, after losing Saquon, which you guys know, one of my favorite Giants of all time.
Yeah.
It was big shoes to fill. And he really took. I mean, it took a little while for him to get going, but he took over like the RB1 position on this team. Like Devin Singletary, I'm pretty sure Singletary only didn't have double digit carries till like after week 4. Like after week 4, Tracy was the lead guy, like obviously. His PFF grade was a little bit not underwhelming, but like a little bit all over the place kind of.
Yeah.
His receiving grade was extremely low, which I thought was really weird because in college he was a receiver. So it's kind of funny that his receiving grade, he ranked 43rd out of 47 running backs. But I thought overall, like he provided what we needed for like a late round pick. It's pretty encouraging. Very exciting player. Good stuff ahead from him.
Yeah, I think the way PFF rates the running backs, I mean, I don't like.
It's weird.
It's very weird. Like Saquon Barkley is ranked 10th on PFF. He's an MVP candidate, and he's going to win like Offensive Player of the Year. As much as I hate to say that, he's going to. So I think the way PFF ranks their running backs a little odd. He did have 4 fumbles. Maybe it was because of that, but I do think he was a very valuable player for them. He scored a bunch of touchdowns. He had 5 touchdowns, which is a lot for the Giants actually. He had 839 rush yards. He had I think around 200 receiving yards on top of that. He was a receiver in college. It brings that pass catching aspect, like Matt said. He's 25 years old. He's a little old, but I think for a 5th round pick, it was definitely a steal. And I think you're going to see him involved in the Giants offense next year. Whether or not they take another running back in like the 3rd or 4th round, whether they stick with Singletary, I don't think he has the capacity to be a lead back. I think he's like 15 to 20 like touches guy per game, but I think he's definitely going to be very involved in the offense moving forward.
Yeah, definitely an exciting player to watch. And before we get to the bad news, which was most of the year, I think one other positive we can kind of take away was the D line, right? Obviously, big sexy Dexy up the middle, just an incredible player, so disruptive, getting to the passer, getting to the rusher, one of the highest graded defensive tackles by PFF in the league. And Brian Burns was a guy that we used to argue kind of sucked, and we were a little frustrated with, the signing of him, but he really turned it on, especially towards the end of the year, maybe when we weren't watching games as much as the season kind of got out of reach. And Kayvon Thibodeau, a guy who's been a little bit banged up, but has shown plenty of promise throughout his young career so far. So before we get to all the negatives, let's maybe throw these guys some compliments.
Yeah, I mean, I have absolutely nothing bad to say about Dexter Lawrence. I mean, I think he's the best defense tackle in football. PFF has him ranked 2nd. He's definitely the best like rush stopper in football. Having him on defense is very valuable. If you're the opposing offensive coordinator, like you have to double team him, you have to game plan against them, and it just changes the way like your opposing offense is game planning. And I think having a player like that is extremely valuable. I guess we'll touch on some of the other players in a bit, but Matt, you have anything on?
Well, Sexy Dexy, like he like normal years, like we've known he's been a great player, but I thought this year he like stepped it up in terms of like his like pass rush ability. Like it felt like he was getting sacks left and right before like he went down with the season-ending injury, but yeah. And then Brian Burns, as you said, took a little while to get going, but I thought he played fine towards the end of the year. I'd like a little more from him considering we're paying him, what, $30 million a year?
Yep.
The guy I want to talk about here, though, and I was so excited when we drafted this guy out of college.
Yeah.
Like, he was a stud. He was the best player. I could be wrong, but I believe he was the top recruit coming out of high school, or at least in the state of California when he came out. Kayvon Thibodeau, as we saw yesterday on Twitter, he had some things to say for Des Bryant that I think he should be a little more focused on doing better on the field. But yeah, what do you guys have to say about that stuff?
Yeah,
I mean, when you're a pro athlete, like getting into the off the field antics, we've seen the type of trouble it can bring, and especially with a guy like KT who was off the field a lot, wasn't playing a ton, was kind of inconsistent. He's been a little bit up and down, but the highs have been highs and the lows have been low for him. So definitely looking for a bounce back, healthy year for him last year. I mean, The Twitter stuff is whatever. I mean, mixing it up with Des Bryant, who's kind of a clown in himself, like
That's
probably
true.
not the greatest idea. But I think it's pretty easy to say that if all three of these guys bring their best next year, the Giants D line is going to be really, really scary coming into next year. So,
Yeah.
um,
The last thing I'll have to say about Tibbs is like I guess it's understandable. It's gonna be like a new age of like NFL players coming out with like the confidence and like just with social media and stuff. And like I feel like Tibbs was like the first guy coming out of like not the first, but one of the guys coming out pioneering coming out of high school. Like he was the best at every level he's been at. So I mean that comes with swagger, confidence, and like everything that
yeah,
comes with that.
great
Yeah.
point.
But like I mean, I remember when they were evaluating him in the draft process, like his character was like, because he always was a little bit cocky. That was something that came into it, and we all would have been fine with it if he was, double digit sacks every year. Like who cares? Like I'd invite it. That'd be sick.
Yeah.
But I mean, he'll grow as he gets older and stuff, and like becomes more of a veteran presence on the team. But I don't know.
If he
I would
stays,
just like
if he
I would just like a
stays.
little bit more out of him if you can't
Yeah,
tell.
yeah,
Yeah, I
definitely.
think I think with Tibbs, I think this is the offseason they have to decide on his fifth year option. I think this is his third year. So they're deciding on the fifth year option. I don't see how they can exercise the fifth year option with him. I think it's a do or die season for him next season if he performs and you pay him. If he doesn't, I don't think you can. I don't know
Yeah,
what
I
you
think.
think about that, Matt or
Well, I
Chris.
was gonna
What do
say,
you?
I think he's gonna be expecting like big money, like regardless. Like it's just like the guy he is. Like he lives life bigger than life, or whatever the saying is. And I just think he's gonna be expecting like elite edge money, and he hasn't been an elite edge. So it's a tough decision because he was in the first. He was in Shane's first draft class. So like Shane liked this guy. I'd be curious to see like what his thought process on moving forward with him would be. But yeah.
Yeah, and really that kind of wraps up all of the positives from this year. Some good things to talk about, some promising young players, but unfortunately, when we return, all hell is going to break loose. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. And, we got the fun stuff out of the way. Well, maybe not the so fun stuff, because now is when shit's really going to hit the fan. Watching a 3-14 football team was just absolutely disastrous this year. Nobody really made any progress. It was honestly, from the first section of the show, all of the young players coming in really kind of helped this team be somewhat relevant. So now we're going to kind of harp on the Giants a little bit and focus on where things went wrong. So obviously, if anybody watched Hard Knocks in the offseason, the decision to let Saquon Barkley walk really kind of turned the tide for the Giants. We've seen the kind of year he's had with the Eagles, especially in the NFC Championship game. This guy absolutely dominated the NFL. I know you guys have very different thoughts, so I'm gonna hand the mic over and let's let the
Yeah, I'll
games
take it.
begin.
I'll take it.
Thoughts on Saquon,
Yeah,
Jesse?
yeah, I'll take it first. I'll first like to preface Saquon Barkley is an amazing running back. It sucks to see him in Philadelphia. I'm living in Philadelphia currently, and because I go to school at Penn. Like I walk outside and I see like the Saquon Barkley jersey, and it's disgusting. It's terrible. However, I'm gonna make the argument that letting Saquon Barkley go was in the Giants' best interest. Um, I think you got to look at it. And I think you have to look at a lot of people say, like, how do you pay Daniel Jones 40 million and pay Saquon nothing or franchise tag him? I think you have to look at them as two independent decisions, and I think that's what the New York Giants did. I think they looked at it. I think they looked at it and they said, we have a quarterback here. We think he could potentially be the franchise quarterback. The quarterback position matters a lot more than the running back position, and they paid the quarterback. And then they had money to pay Saquon Barkley. It's not like they didn't. They paid other players, and they decided to tag him that one year. And the next year, they decided that he wasn't worth it because he was old. It wasn't contributing to the team. To add on to that, the Giants' record with Saquon Barkley was 25, 48, and 1. It's terrible. Saquon Barkley is a generational talent, but if you don't have the offensive line, if you don't have the quarterback, if you don't have the team to back him up, it doesn't matter. Like we had Saquon Barkley last year. He is the exact same he's the exact same player he was last year as he is in the Eagles right now. But on the New York Giants team last year, he only won 5 games. We won 3 this year. So maybe Saquon Barkley wins you one more game, maybe 2. I can't understand the Giants like if the Giants were to drop 60 million on Barkley, like I just can't understand it for an extra win when you only have 3 wins. I mean,
It
I
wasn't
know
gonna.
Matt's gonna.
Oh,
It wasn't gonna take.
before I
It
let
wasn't
Matt
gonna
talk,
take.
hold on. Before I let Matt talk,
Yeah.
I just think we should let our listeners know that Matthew Lucida is probably the biggest Saquon Barkley fan I've ever met in my entire life. I have videos on my phone after he was drafted of him screaming and going crazy, rightfully so, obviously generational talent. But I think before we let the argument go, everybody should know that Matthew Lucida is the biggest Saquon Barkley fan on the planet. Matt,
and I'll own it. I'll own it. That guy was special. I mean, he was the background of my phone for all of what freshman year of high school. Like, embarrassing, but I mean, all right. I have a few things to say. So the difference, like Saquon was our franchise. Like he was the franchise guy. You looked at like if you New York Giants, Saquon Barkley's face was there. Jersey sales, all that stuff. So and he was a great guy on like great character, great player. Like I just don't understand. Like you set a bad precedent, I think, of not paying your guys. Saquon has been here through the thick of it. To not pay him and just the way the whole situation went down, I just thought was disgusting and like was a really bad job.
You
Second
don't think
point,
he's a traitor though? You don't think he's a traitor for going to Philly?
You know what? I do. This year has been one of the most confusing times I have as a Giants fan. Like I didn't know what like. When I saw him on the screen, I wanted to puke and like the Kelly Green, but like at the same time, I'm like, oh, that's my dog. So,
yeah.
But I want to talk about the point of the money. You said $60 million. The Eagles were able to sign him for $37.75 million over 3 years, with him earning up to maybe I think it was like $46.75 million over three with incentives. I mean, the Giants were rumored to offer like at the time, like during like last year's offseason and free agency, like we were in talks for 10 to 12, and it took 13 and a half to get him to sign. And I just remember us not having the guaranteed money was what he was like stuck on. But aside from that, let's look at what we spent the money on, right? Okay, so let's take a look. The first guys we signed after was Duran Illuminor. He of the money that we spent, Duran Illuminor I thought was the best free agent signing that we had with the money that was spent right after we let Saquon walk. He had I believe he had like a 65 PFF grade out of about 140 players, so middle of the pack. He was making 14 mil over 2 years, so $7 million of that money gone. The next guy, John Runyon Jr. Ready? 3 years, $30 million contract. And he had a PFF grade. He was the 96th best guard out of 135 qualifying candidates. That's just garbage. Like we let a franchise player walk, all pro guy, a guy that's going to win offensive player of the year. Could have won.
But he
MVP,
wouldn't on the
honestly.
Giants. He wouldn't even come close in the Giants.
Okay,
he might not even have 1,000. He didn't have 1,000. He had 2,000-yard seasons on the Giants.
That's crap, and you know it's crap. I'll get back to that. Then the third guy, Devin Singletary. He spent $5.5 million per year on average over 3 years.
Just to get replaced by our own.
Yeah, that was a bad signing. That was a bad signing.
That was terrible. Like, what are we doing? Like, I mean, he didn't even get double-digit carries, as I said earlier. Like after week 4, like he was useless, and I don't really know what to do with him. Maybe he'll bounce back. Like I like him as a guy, and I thought he ran hard, but to let a guy of such importance to your franchise like go, I'm honestly shocked that Mara like let that shit happen. Like. Honestly, like I don't know. I thought he might step in. I mean, you see, that clip has gone viral of him saying he wouldn't sleep. Well, now Saquon's in the Super Bowl, and you're right here. Yeah. So I don't know.
At the end of the day, like watching the Hard Knocks, like they chose. I remember Joe Shane literally said, is our team going to be the identity to hand the ball off to a $12, $13 million running back? And that's what the Eagles are. Look at them. You know,
they're not. But the Eagles, it's different because the Eagles have the best offensive line in football. Yeah, the best. It's not even close. The Giants' offensive line is terrible. You put Saquon Barkley behind the Giants' offensive line this year.
Yeah,
he did it last year, and he he barely got 1,000 yards. Like if the Giants had the Eagles' like offensive line, and he was a missing piece to the puzzle, like he was for Philly, then I would say, you know what, you sign him. But because of where the Giants were at, it just doesn't. He adds you maybe one win, and you're a 3-win team. Like you're better off trying to rebuild the line with the money. Take the risk. I get what you're saying.
Well, they just tried to rebuild the line.
We've been rebuilding this line for what? Since I was maybe 12. I don't know. Actually, like I get what they were trying to do, and I understand your point that Saquon wouldn't have had as good of a season that he did in Philly. Yeah, he might not have had 2,000 rushing yards. Yeah,
that would
have been nice to have on our team, but. I know that wouldn't have happened with different offensive lines, but the point is you're letting a generational talent walk. Like think about this in the context of like other sports. Like like just letting your best player walk. It's just it's fundamentally goes against like anything that I've ever felt about being a fan in my life.
Yeah.
Like it makes no sense to me.
Well, I
Like
guess we should go from one disappointing offseason move to
Yeah,
another. And, there's loads
yeah,
to
I
talk
can.
about on this topic, but
yeah, I could
The
go
Daniel
entire list
Jones,
for
Jones,
hours.
yeah,
Daniel
he's
Jones
tough.
signed a 4-year contract. He was released from the team. He was granted release. There's really nothing good here. Obviously, he had the one season, brought them to the playoffs, kind of a heroic win over the Vikings. Yada yada yada. That was great. Then the Giants decided to hand him this huge contract, making over $40 million a year, and he's gone. He's actually on the Vikings right now. So there's nothing good here. This put the franchise back five
Yeah,
to
it's
ten
just
years by giving him this contract. So Jesse,
yeah.
we'll start with you. You're the numbers man. Break it down for us.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the worst move of the last decade. I mean, for me, I mean, just want to preface this. I'm a very big Eli Manning fan. He was like my hero growing up. He'll be in the Hall of Fame in about a few weeks. But
Yes, sir.
Daniel Jones has started 70 games for the Giants. His record is 24, 44, and 1. I like the fact that he played 6 seasons and wasn't benched or wasn't cut beforehand is ridiculous. The fact that he was given a $40 million a year contract is insane. He went 1-15 in prime time. You are the quarterback of a big market team in New York, and you go 1-15 in prime time. Being a quarterback is about leadership, skill, and being clutch. He had the leadership aspect. I'll give him that. He was certainly not clutch, 1-15 in prime time. He couldn't deliver when you needed him, and he was just a bad football player. Whether it's missing reads, whether it's staring down your first guy, whether it's poor footwork in the pocket, whether it's inaccurate passes. I mean, I can go on and on and on about how bad of a quarterback he was. He had that one decently good year.
With
The
15
Giants,
touchdowns. Like they gave him 40 million after 15
yeah,
touchdowns.
15
Like,
Yeah,
touchdowns. He
that's
beat
just
he beat
insane.
the when you look at the teams he beat the Texans, he beat the Jaguars, he beat the Titans, he beat the
Bears, the
Commanders,
Panthers.
the Bears, the Panthers. I mean, they had a terrible
Yeah.
schedule. They had an easy schedule that year. He barely beat these teams. He really didn't play well, and they paid him.
Got a
Um,
playoff win though somehow.
he
That was
did. I
fun.
mean, I mean the Vikings apparently can't play in the playoffs. You saw that against the Rams
I mean
last
that
week.
that playoff win might have cost our franchise another 5 years. So who
Yeah,
knows?
Seriously. I mean, they
Paying
literally
him was
probably looked at
terrible.
that game and said, this guy can do this in the future.
I agree with Jay, man. Like full heart, rare topic that we ever agree on. Yeah, that contract was horrendous. I remember like when that dropped, I had like mixed feelings. I thought like it'd be worth it if we got him for like 32, 33, something like that, which again would have been
Still
a
wouldn't have been. Yeah,
disgrace. It would
terrible.
have been good.
Yeah.
Like I was when I saw 40, I was like, are you like kidding? Like that's insane. I want to talk about his exit from the team though. Like as much as we can like hate on the guy for being bad at his job and not getting
Yeah.
wins on the field, like he was a good dude. I mean, you've seen like what he did for the O lineman with giving him gifts after he was cut from the team. Like he's a well respected guy in the locker room, and I mean I have respect for him for that reason.
He's a
But
good guy.
the way that the organization handled it's like, what are we doing? Like he was there was like rumors about him being like the scout team safety because of his like injury clause in his contract. It's like I get it, but he was the quarterback of the New York Giants. Like to do him that, like no wonder he requested to be released. Like I don't know. I think he'll be a fine to a well above average backup in the NFL. Like he's a smart guy. We know he went to Duke. I mean, you got to be smart to go there. And like he had, I can't even remember how many play callers he had. I think it was like 5 different play callers, different systems he had to deal with. Like I think
Yeah.
he'll be able to adjust to that. And I think the backup role will suit him well. I don't wish him any harm or any bad. I just he was never meant to succeed here. Like the reaction on draft night was invalid for a reason. I wish it could have worked out, but it just was just terrible, man.
Yep.
And now we're in this mess. Like, where do we go from here? I mean,
Yeah.
we'll discuss it at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, we will.
Watching his exit interview was like really sad. I mean,
It was
just the way he
sad.
worded things, like it was an honor to be a New York Giant, all this stuff. Like this dude gave it his all, but just genuinely wasn't good. Like straight up was
Just
not
wasn't
good.
good enough.
It
Yeah,
wasn't.
So, I mean, that's kind of what happens. And he had plenty of opportunities. It's not like, I mean, were the Giants great when they drafted him? No, but quarterbacks are responsible for kind of turning franchises around, and he just wasn't able
Yep.
to do it. So,
I
wish
agree.
him the best of luck in Minnesota. But we're going to kind of transition now. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. The offensive line had its highs this year, I would say. Had some, obviously
Yeah.
Andrew Thomas I would say is probably the only solidified guy on the offensive line at left tackle. But Jesse, I know you got some strong opinions on John Michael Schmitz and Evan Neal, so let's hear
Yeah, Evan Neal. I mean, look, it was Joe Shane's first year. You have two top 10 picks. It really is the ability to change a franchise around. You pick Tibbs at 5. I think for the production he's had, I think he's a bust. And then you have Neal at 7, who didn't even start this year because he was that bad. Evan Neal is a bad football player. He's had similar to Tibbs, he's had incidents where like online where he's like chirping fans. He seems to not be able to handle like the New York media. He's just over. I mean, he gets beat off the edge. He's slow. He's slow out of his stance. I think Evan Neal's not a good player. I also think John Michael Schmitz frustrates me a lot. He's actually John Michael Schmitz. I'll give it to him. He's actually a good run blocker. It's just the pass blocking that really gets me. He's ranked 54 out of 64 qualifying centers. Again, there's 32 teams in football, so that means that a lot of backup centers are better than him
it.
at pass blocking. So he really needs to pick that up. This is his second year. I think we should take a center in the draft for free agency. I think the only solidified position is Thomas. I agree. Runyon, they're gonna start next year at guard because they paid him. Probably Luminor at guard or tackle. So I think we're looking at 2 to 3 new offensive linemen coming in, whether it's free agency or the draft. For sure. I can't see how Schmitz starts next year, and Evan Neal I would expect to be off the team.
He's young. I mean, Evan Neal at this point is like, I think we know what we got there. So we have to move on from him when the time comes. I have slight hope that somehow JMS can figure it out. I mean, he will be going in his third year. And I don't hate the idea of drafting like a center late in the draft. I think there are more pressing needs, obviously, earlier in the draft. But yeah, I agree with a lot what you had to say. Just another unfortunate, it just hasn't panned out yet, and we need to turn it around soon.
Yeah, I mean, in next episode, we're kind of going to talk a little bit more about the Giants' future, but it just feels like there's so many different directions they could go. Obviously,
Yep.
every team needs a quarterback. I think that's a guarantee. If you look at the past Super Bowl winners, every single team, whether it's Mahomes, Brady, whoever it may be, they always have a stud under center. And the Giants truly haven't had somebody since like 2014, 2015, when,
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Eli Manning kind of fell off and hung him up. I feel like we barely even got to anything. So just
Yeah.
with all of the different
Yeah.
things that happened this season, just so many things to talk about. Obviously, the draft, free agency, that'll kind of be the topic of next episode. So we thank you all for stopping in and listening. This has been the very first episode of Big Apple Breakdown. Matty L, Jesse, Sohlbrotha, it's a pleasure. Thank you guys for hopping on, and we'll see you in the next one.